Hello everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to speakupliberty.com. Before I get into the topic today, I just want to note that I identify as a Republican atheist. I recently came across an article titled "When Religious Liberty Was Used to Justify Racism Instead of Homophobia." This was published by Think Progress in 2014, so a few years ago. Before I go into this article and why I'm talking about it, I just want to note that many young people and even older people, Americans that I speak to, have this concept that the Republican Party is the racist party, the religious party, and it always has been. There's this concept that the Democratic Party has always been a party that has prioritized civil rights and was not religious. And I found through my own research that this is an incredibly false concept, that the Democratic Party was very religious for an extended period of time. Even today, there are many religious politicians who are Democrat. And also, the Democratic Party was incredibly racist. From my own research, I've learned that the Democratic Party was actually jointly connected to the Ku Klux Klan after the Civil War. So I took interest in this article because it talks about religious liberty being used to justify racism instead of homophobia. And I was wondering what this liberal-leaning news source Think Progress would present on this topic. Looking at the beginning of the article, I immediately took note that the author noted the political party of the politicians that he's talking about. So the article starts off talking about this Arizona License to Discriminate bill, which was a bill introduced in Arizona that would give business owners the right to discriminate against LGBT community and not serve the LGBT community if they wanted to do so. I also want to quickly note that the Republican politicians that this author references to in regards to the discrimination bill in Arizona, they actually called the governor of Arizona and retracted their support for the bill and stated that they were wrong to support it. So I take note of that they actually admitted that they were wrong. I'm just generally looking at this specific article and how this author is presenting information in relation to the political parties in the U.S. I immediately take note that he notes 2008 GOP presidential candidate John McCain and 2012 GOP presidential candidate Mitt Romney. He also notes an Arizona State Rep, Eddie Farnsworth, and he puts an R at the end of the name, which means Republican. So he's noting here that the politicians he's referencing to are Republican. It's very obvious he's doing this. Later on in the article, he starts going into detail about how this concept of religious liberty has played a role historically in racism in the United States. And he starts to give examples of historical politicians that used this concept of religious liberty to support their concepts of racism. And I take note that these politicians were serious racists. They were involved with the Ku Klux Klan and just did horrible things, supported horrible policies. But from my own research, I knew that the Democratic Party worked jointly with the Ku Klux Klan after the Civil War. And so when I hear historical references to politicians who supported racist policies, it always crosses my mind, how much do you want to bet that these politicians were Democrat? I looked further into these politicians that were referenced to in regards to racism in the past. And there's Theodore Bilbo, Georgia Governor Alan Candler, and Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett, as well as Senator Harry Byrd of Virginia. In the article from Think Progress, it's never noted that they're Democrat. It's never stated that they're Democrat, and the author doesn't even include a D after their name to note that these people were Democrats. So I looked into it further. I looked up every one of their names, come to find out that they're all Democrats. All these people that he references to that were associated with the Ku Klux Klan were Democrats. And also I took note of religion. Georgia Governor Alan Candler was Presbyterian. Harry Byrd of Virginia was a Baptist and Freemason. And these people weren't just casual racists that kind of hung out in their own private space and kept their thoughts to themselves. They were incredibly open. So when we're talking about religious liberty being used to justify racism, let's look at what this article states about Senator Bilbo. It says, for Senator Bilbo, however, racism was more than just an ideology, it was a sincerely held religious belief. In a book entitled Take Your Choice, Separation or Mongrelization, Bilbo wrote that purity of race is a gift of God, and God in his infinite wisdom has so ordained it that when a man destroys his racial purity, it can never be redeemed. Allowing the blood of the races to mix, according to Bilbo, was a direct attack on the divine plan of God. There is every reason to believe that misconception, sorry, I got that word wrong, and amalgamation are sins of a man in direct defiance to the will of God. We can see here that this Senator Bilbo, he's not simply racist just to be racist. I mean, he has actual religious belief to justify his racism. This is interesting because today there's this concept that the religious party and the racist party are the Republicans, and that it's always been that way throughout American history. But here we can see up front that here's a Democrat who is very religious and very racist, but this author does not note that he's a Democrat. This article continues this misconception that the Republican Party is the racist and religious party, when really we can see that religion has actually played a critical role in the Democratic Party, historically speaking, which is very interesting to take note, and I think would really throw a wrench in a lot of the concepts that people have right now of these political parties. And something else I take note of is that this racism was recent as well. I mean, we think that this is all back in the early 1900s, but even as recent as 1960, the article notes Ross Barnett won Mississippi governorship in a landslide in 1960 after claiming that the good Lord was the original segregationist. Again, Ross Barnett was a Democrat, and here he is supporting segregation and saying that the good Lord was a segregationist. So he's actually defining the Lord and saying what the Lord is. And again, I have to stress that this is a Democrat. So the next time you speak to someone and they say that the Republican Party is the racist party, the religious party, I just encourage you to bring up and let people know and be aware. By the way, the most notorious racist people, political people in American history were Democrats. And the Democratic Party worked jointly with the Ku Klux Klan after the Civil War, and it continued for decades. It didn't just simply stop one day and all the Democrats said, oh, by the way, now we're going to be this party of civil rights. I mean, there's still traces of this in the Democratic Party. And we can see today that there's just a lot of racial issues with the Democratic Party. It seems like it's not something that this party can't get over. And I also want to note a statement that was noted in the article that Senator Bilbo said. He said, no man can leave the Klan. He takes an oath not to do that. Once a Ku Klux, always a Ku Klux. This is coming from a Democrat. Take note of that.